Hi, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about Big Idea 2, and we're going to be moving on from evolution. So just a little bit about what Big Idea 2 is. It's that biological systems utilize free energy and molecular building blocks to grow, to reproduce, and to maintain dynamic homeostasis. So what exactly does that include? It includes talking about energy and how it's used by both plants and animals, bacteria, and other organisms, how we get energy from the sun through photosynthesis, by using sunlight, how we build macromolecules like carbohydrates, so these are the things that are found in things like bread and potatoes and starches, and includes things how we turn that into energy, such as cellular respiration, what happens when there isn't any oxygen, such as fermentation. The goal of all that is ATP, and we'll be focusing on your guys' favorite thing, it seems like cells, and how cells work with a surface to volume ratio. This will be part of our first big lab with diffusion and osmosis. We'll also talk on apoptosis and programmed cell death, which might be relevant to people interested in cancer. And we'll also hit on the bigger ideas of growth and development and how your body maintains homeostasis. So digging right into it, what exactly are we talking about? What are our enduring understandings? We're going to especially first hit on the idea of free energy and matter, specifically with different cycles such as glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, Calvin cycle, fermentation, and what your body does with that. So we'll hit on vocabulary like endothermy and exothermy, and we'll really get into the specifics of what photosynthesis and cellular respiration infer and have to deal with. So all this stuff with like electrochemical gradient, ATP synthase, pyruvate, NADH, FADH2, oxidative phosphorylation, ADP, that's all gibberish. That's okay. That's what we're going to get into, the specifics. Some things you might want to remember back from freshman bio include some of this stuff. So an organism has to work within its environment. So that's part of homeostasis. What does that include? Things like carbon, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. If you're interested, I do have the shortened version of that for freshmen available. We're also going to talk about properties of water and why water is so important. So what are our first labs going to look at? We're going to be looking at cell membranes. We're going to be looking about how cell membranes interact, what a phospholipid is, how things move back and forth through sodium and potassium pumps. We'll also talk about hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic, which you might be familiar with from anatomy. They do a demo with an egg. So we'll talk about some of that stuff as well, and we'll look at how that works with plant cells. Of course, we couldn't do cells without talking about special organelles, so we'll talk about endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, chloroplasts, and how that relates back to evolution, and how there's common traits that are inherited based on those organelles. We'll also talk about feedback loops, which has been pretty common that people talk about, a negative feedback loop and positive feedback loop. We'll focus on specific examples and what happens when those feedback loops go wrong. We'll also talk about growth and development. So this is kind of the new thing that we're going to look back at evolution and stuff that we have in common across different species. So this is the new focus. Back in the day, they used to do the tour of the animal kingdom. They would show you all the animals, but now we're going to focus on specific systems, and that's what we're going to look at. Specifically, how do all organisms deal with gas exchange, digestion, vacuoles, how do they deal with thermoregulation? And again, the idea of what happens when things go wrong, we'll look at the dynamic systems there. And we'll also go back to the immune system, so B's and T cells, if you remember that, we'll hit that again. What else are we going to talk about? We're going to be talking about a lot of timing and coordination. So how does your body time all this stuff to happen? Not only does cells have to work together, but they have to time it accurately. Some of the things you might remember from your plants experiment would be things like phototropism, photoperiodism. We'll also talk about how some of the animal behavior, things like circadian rhythms, will be touched on, and things like communication and learning. So we see a lot of things from very small to very big. We'll hit on cells, and we'll also move from cells to whole organisms and how ecosystems deal with energy. So that was what the AP Bio test wants you to know content-wise. Here I'm going to hit on, again, our portfolio. Here are some of the major ideas, things from metabolism, periodism, chemical signaling, and behaviorism. Don't forget your self-reflection when you have this sheet, but I also wanted to hit on the learning objectives. So I tweaked them a little bit this time around so that they're paragraphs, so you have a little bit more space. So what are you going to be asked to do on the AP test besides that information that I kind of briefly went over? You're going to be asked to explain how systems use energy, and that can be from an organism or a population or ecosystem. You're going to talk about how those energies are used. So captured, stored, and used has to do again with photosynthesis and cellular respiration. 2.6 would be a great example talking about the diffusion osmosis lab. So the labs have a lot to do with more than one of these objectives. So if you're looking for something that will fit one, I would definitely encourage your labs. We'll talk about cell shape and size the same way. Molecules, again, we'll hit on that, and macromolecules this week and next week. Movement and molecules, again, have to do with cell membranes. So you see kind of a theme that these things are all linked to a cell membrane lab. We'll talk about homeostasis. Again, active movement, this would be a good example to talk about the sodium-potassium pumps. Internal membranes and organelles, again, going back to freshman bio, what does the chloroplast do? Differences between prokaryote and eukaryote, we've already touched on a little bit last unit with the viruses and bacteria. So the cool thing about these portfolios is you can use things from throughout the year. So as we get closer and closer to the end, there'll be more stuff that's integrated, which is why we started with the evolution. So comparing and contrasting prokaryote and eukaryote cells, you can pull from the evolution unit as well as this current unit to make your case. Again, feedback loops we'll touch on. More feedback loops. How organisms change. We'll touch a little bit on ecology this time around. We'll end on that actually, on ecology and the energy as it moves through the abiotic and biotic factors. More on homeostasis. We'll get into specifics, antigens and antibodies for the immune responses. This could also be a reflection back to freshman year. And we'll again end with growth and development, apoptosis, and cell regulation, which might even bleed into next semester when we talk about mitosis and meiosis and the control mechanisms for that. And to bring us back, we have again something with cyclical. We're making sure we're reviewing all the way through for the AP test. So we'll have a little bit on natural selection as well. So basically this was just kind of an overview of what we're going to be covering. I also wanted to show you kind of the calendar of what this might look like. So to kind of show you a timeline of where we're going to go, we're going to start with biochemistry, macromolecules, and organelles. So this will be kind of a little review, and then it's just kind of for me to get an idea of what you know. So we'll do that this week. Next week we'll start moving into cell diffusion and osmosis. We'll have our first lab having to do with cells. That'll be a little bit more of what you guys are used to for a wet lab. We'll hit enzymes and what enzymes do, how they have an active site, how they can be inhibited. We'll talk about photosynthesis and how we get energy from the sun, and we'll talk about some of the specifics in that process, cellular respiration. We'll hit into fermentation. And for the next 4 weeks after that, we're going to have a lab pretty much every week. We're going to tweak it a little bit to make it easier on you, but the idea is you have a lot to pick for your poster session. From there, we'll talk about some specifics in homeostasis and how the body maintains stuff the same, having to do with transport. From there, we'll go to growth and development and how that's regulated. We'll hit the immune system, energy, movement, and systems, and lastly, we'll also talk about kind of some comparative systems. So you can kind of look at things like how different organisms deal with waste removal, how different organisms deal with filling in information. From there, we'll wrap up the big idea, and that'll basically bring us to the end of the semester, and we'll get ready for spring semester and start hitting more of these ideas. So that's basically big idea 2. If you have any questions, of course, please feel free to ask. Some of this stuff will change based on the knowledge you guys know, you guys and girls will know, and that'll kind of frame where we're going. But big idea, we're looking at energy and how energy moves in the system. Hope you have a great day. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to working with you in the lab.